Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lisa Rafter with The Monitor. I want to welcome all of you to Monitor Live, our very first live stream conference. However, we're going to wait a couple of minutes because we see lots of people literally by the second joining. So just give us a couple of minutes so that everybody gets settled in, and we'll be right back with you. Hi, everyone. It's Lisa Rafter with The Monitor. We are getting ready to start the conference, but people are still joining, so just give us a couple more minutes and we'll get started. Stay tuned. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Monitor Live. This is our first ever live stream conference. We did one earlier this morning, so that was part one, and here is part two. So for those of you who joined us for part one, as you can see, we have a whole different lineup of speakers, so we'll be hearing a whole new set of perspectives on what our industry is currently dealing with. So we wanted to put this together rapidly in response to the COVID-19 crisis, and we thought two things. One, it would be great to hear from each other, get our perspectives on how are we adapting, what ways are we adapting, how do we see the future, and then secondly, quite honestly, just to be together, see each other, hear each other's voices. So welcome. Thank you again for being here, for taking time out of your very valuable days, which I know we're all busier than ever, but to be here with us today. So before I introduce our moderator, I want to first thank our sponsors of today's event. Today's sponsors. We are fortunate today to have the sponsorship of MantraPoint, Rinaldi Advisory Services, Tomorrow Zone, M-Media, and Syndify. I'd also especially like to thank today's platinum sponsor, IDS Asset Finance Technology. In these uncharted times, the last thing you need to worry about is the management of your front and back office system. We know that these are challenging times, and regardless of the size of your organization, we're here to help. IDS Cloud was designed to take the worry out of system management and let you focus on building your business. IDS Cloud is a 100% scalable SaaS solution where you only pay for what you use. All you need is an internet connection to have access to the equipment finance industry's leading origination and portfolio management solution. So now I'm going to introduce our moderator for the day. Many of you know Deborah Rubin. So Deb is an award-winning consultant and the CEO and founder of Tomorrow Zone, a firm specializing in technology trends and advising finance industry leaders who want to capitalize on the latest innovations to prepare for the future. Deb has a broad equipment finance industry and professional background in both financial services and the software industry. She is the author of the latest editions of the Certified Leasing and Finance Professionals Handbook. Deb serves on the ELFA Board of Directors, the Monitor Editorial Board, and chairs an Industry Technology Innovation Working Group. So Deb, hello, thank you, welcome, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Lisa. So excited to be here again this afternoon. We had a great session this morning. It's our first time doing a live event like this for Monitor. So I want to just thank our panelists for joining us today and welcome our audience. We had a very interactive session this morning, and we're hoping that this afternoon will be just as interactive. Similar to the way that we do our live in-person events, this is a discussion and we'd love for you to join in. So there are 3 different ways that you can interact with us today in our live meeting. First of all is the Q&A. So you should see a Q&A button in your Zoom interface, and you can just hit that button and ask a question. And I will be monitoring that Q&A stream and working questions into the panel as I see fit. The other way that you can interact with us is through our polling. And our polls today are sponsored by our platinum sponsor, IDS. So you should see a poll on your screen right now. This is our first poll. Go ahead and take a moment to answer the questions in the poll. And while you're doing that, I'll just mention the third way that you can interact with us, and that's through chat. So you should see a little chat button in your Zoom window, and you can just hit that if you want to interact with others that are on the meeting. And Lisa Rafter will be monitoring the chat stream through this meeting. So let's take a look at our poll results before we move on. And there you have it. Oh, wow. Seeing a lot of adoption of new tools related to the crisis. And it looks like people are settling into working remotely. That's one of the first things we're going to be talking about with our panelists. So I'd like to take a moment and introduce our panelists. We have an awesome group of panelists this afternoon. Joining us is Andrew Cotter, the EVP and CIO at Somerset Capital Group. Welcome, Andrew. And we've got Katie Emmel, the Chief Operating Officer at IDS. Thanks, Katie. And we also have Chris Enbaum, CEO at AP Equipment Financing and Work Truck Direct. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thanks,
all right, so today's discussion is going to cover a variety of topics related to the current pandemic situation, and specifically, how is that playing out in our industry? How are leaders and equipment finance companies handling the situation? We're going to cover a variety of topics such as how are we handling the shift to remote working? Everyone is dealing with that a little bit different, and it's impacting companies in different ways. Serving disrupted customers. How do you maintain a great customer experience and relationship when you're serving customers that are just as disrupted as you are? We'll be talking a bit about the technology considerations and what we're learning through this crisis, leading through the crisis. And beyond what's going on right now, we're going to spend a bit of time talking about what do we see on the other side of the crisis? What does the future look like? So let's get into it. The first thing we're going to talk about with our panelists is the COVID-19 crisis workforce impacts. And the crisis has kind of unfolded in different ways for everyone, personally, professionally, and for every company. We seem to be adapting to remote working, and I'd love to hear from our panelists a bit about how your team is settling into it and how are things going now with the shift in our work styles that was forced upon us. Also share just a little context for us a bit about your company and just how's it going now. We'll start with Andrew and then we'll move to Katie and Chris. So Andrew, take it away.
Thanks, Deb. Somerset serves a mid-sized and large companies throughout the Americas, Asia, Europe. Financing is sort of our core business, but we also have asset management, logistics and disposal services, a little bit different than some other finance companies probably on. And about 130 employees, 7 offices, 4 of which are equipment warehouses, which puts a different dynamic on that workforce and how it's impacted this and what we had to plan for. The events as they unfolded from the initial preventative measures through closing our headquarters about 10 days later kind of happened faster than expected as we went into this, but went without issue. Definitely a lot of stress in some planning, but our continuity plans, things like that sort of fell in place nicely. A couple unexpected items, but our staff transitioned, though with anxiety going home if they weren't used to it, fairly well. And we had to approach those warehouses a little bit differently in some shifts, in multiple days, shifting over to splitting our workforce in half and actually doing some cleaning procedures in between. So all in all, I think it went fairly well, and it's been fairly smooth transition.
Andrew, your sound is cutting in and out a little bit. So if there's something that you can do as we get on to our next topics. So what I caught from that though is, although stressful, it seems to be going well right now. Katie, how about you? I think you're on mute, Katie. Aren't these web meetings fun? There we go.
All right. Katie Emmel with IDS Asset Finance Technology. As was covered with the sponsorship, we provide full lifecycle solutions to the industry, both origination through portfolio management to clients, so in on-prem deployments as well as in the cloud, which we're really excited about, and I'll talk about a bit later. We are headquartered in sunny Minneapolis, although I will say we just had snow in the past few days. With that, we have offices around the world. So we have just under 300 employees. And as we saw this coming, we of course, have business continuity plans like most organizations do. We had done a trial run with our location in India in particular. Just we wanted to make sure we were testing out logistics. We had done that the week of the 9th. And on March 16th, we moved all of our offices to fully working remotely. We're really pleased with that, at how the teams adapted, at how our technology team had us ready to make that transition. We had employees that were working remotely previously. This just allowed us to accelerate everything across the team. We're certainly really focused on supporting our team members. It is a big change. People are home, their children are home, they're managing their work and changes with their family. So we're really focused on our teams, focused on communication as they work through this transition. So we meet with the teams, communication is big. We're meeting with our management team. We're looking at productivity metrics weekly. And then also as a software vendor, it was really important for us to make sure we could also continue to deliver on our customer projects. We have over 30 implementation projects in motion. So that was important for us. We also did a review of our ability to continue to deliver those remotely, and that's all been going really smoothly. So overall, I think our teams have done a great job, both in transitioning to work remotely and really supporting each other through the process, because that's been a key aspect.
Thanks, Katie. That's a big job, getting a global team working remotely. I mean, even though you're already doing it, so much has changed for all of us. Chris, how is it going for you and your team?
Yeah, so Allegiant Partners, we have about 80 employees, and we're in multiple states. And we actually, about 5 years ago, started kind of totally revamped, not just our technology, but all of our processes around everything that we do. So we've been fully digital to the extent that we can be for probably about 3 years now. We've been, all electronic documents, electronic processes, et cetera. So for us, the transitioning the business itself, other than titling, which in some states you still have to do manually, which is more we could have a whole 2-hour discussion just about that in terms of what's going on. But other than that, we were prepared. We did have to buy some laptops, about 30 laptops before this happened, and get them configured. So I was kind of pushing people to do that because we didn't have everybody on laptops. And then after that, it's really just everything that everybody else is talking about in terms of like, okay, everybody's now in their own little silo. Like, how do we get people connected? How do we conduct meetings? How do we kind of check in with staff and people to make sure that they're doing okay and keep them motivated, et cetera. But we have the tools to be able to track everything that everybody does all day. So we had already set that up. So we can see productivity. We track productivity every month. In every position, from documentation, credit, we are tracking individual productivity per employee, and also in terms of functionality. So that part of it was actually pretty easy for us. I also run an equipment vendor. We have dealerships in Oregon, California, and Washington, and it's not huge, but we've got about 25 employees on that side as well, and they have physical dealerships that we're dealing with. So on that side, it was a little different because we're dealing with customers coming in. We have shops and all that kind of stuff. So that side's been a little more challenging because we've had to get determined to be an essential business, and then we really had to put anti-COVID measures in place to make sure that we, stop the spread of the disease. So like our parts desk, for example, we had to completely reconfigure how that worked. We wouldn't allow people to come inside of a building. They had to go to a window to buy parts and order parts and things like that. So there were different challenges in the two different businesses that I run.
Yeah, it's so many new challenges because our situation is so different. Andrew, quick sound test for you.
Can you hear
Say
me
something
now?
brilliant.
How's it sound?
A
Any
little bit better, but you're still
All right.
kind of faint, and we really want to hear what you have to say.
All right, let me see what I can do. Give me a second.
All right, yeah. It's how you make these video meetings work. I'm sure everybody is experiencing that these days.
Any better now?
A little bit better, yeah. So Andrew, we didn't hear everything that you had said earlier, but one of the questions that came in from the audience, how are you monitoring and managing productivity from people working at home? Is that something that you can speak to?
I can. Can you still hear me? Let me just double check.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll
So
go like this if I need you to.
remote,
Crank it up.
obviously, for a lot of people, that's a bit different approach than walking over to someone's desk. But having metrics, having work still has to get done, and as people are doing their jobs, you're going to be able to see it. They may be able to skate by for a day or a week, but I think just being able to see that work is being completed, touching base with them on a daily basis, probably touching base with them more frequently, will help you keep in touch with them. So if I'm having to monitor to make sure my employees are getting work done, then they're probably not the right folks to be working for me. Those folks need to be understanding that the work they're doing is important, and we're all in this together, and we're going to come out through this in a better place.
All right, thanks, Andrew. That sounded a little bit better, but we could use a little more volume from you next time. Just shifting gears a little bit, let's talk a bit about how each of you is dealing with customer experience during these times. I mean, our customers, our partners are just as disrupted as we are personally and professionally. So how is it playing out for you and your company? And what sort of challenges are you facing, and how are you overcoming as you're helping your customers, especially the rise in back office customer service requests, the extensions, modification, and other payment relief? Let's start with Chris on this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very challenging time. We have shifted some staff over to the customer service side to be able to deal with payment relief. Our portfolio right now is running about 15% requested payment relief, which, as I understand it from the industry and small ticket, is actually pretty low, which we're very fortunate to be in some industries that are actually quite busy right now. But we literally shift certain employees from documentation and funding to customer service and helping out on payment relief daily, depending on where the demand is. So we've kind of cross-trained some people to be able to go back and forth. We're starting to see a decline in payment reliefs now, which is good, at least this week. So hopefully we're through at least this part of it in terms of, and hopefully the trend will continue. But we're still behind in actually getting the payment reliefs processed. You have to, actually do documentation, T-values, within our system, and then put them into, have them booked and all that kind of stuff. There's a process behind everyone that happens. So there's some work involved, and then obviously the customers have to accept it. It's all done through DocuSign and everything, but still, you have to track all that. So it just takes additional staff. Now, parts of our business have slowed down substantially because there's less demand. I mean, there's parts of our certain industries that we're in are down 100% because we've stopped funding them. Other parts are down 50 to 70% just because the demand is lower. And then other parts actually were up because there's more demand because they're more internet-based type businesses. So we've had to be very quick at adopting people and training people, and there has been a bit of a challenge on the training side, because normally you can have somebody who's the trainer sit physically next to somebody and help them get trained up. Now we have to do it remotely, and that's obviously been a challenge. I saw in the poll obviously that a lot of people are using different technologies now that they wouldn't have before to help with that sort of a thing, but chatting type technologies, share screen type technologies and things like that. And obviously we've had to adapt to a lot of that as well. Yeah, we just people have had to step up, just like Andrew said. I mean, we actually laid off a few people at the beginning of this. We laid off about 13% of our staff, thinking that and our volumes actually overall picked up. But we've been able to accomplish as much because we kind of, laid off, some of the people that weren't quite as adaptable overall in the process. And so having the right people is obviously key. That all comes into how we ran the business before we got into this. And so if you don't have the right people now, it's a challenging time because, it's hard to train and hire people in this environment.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Andrew, could you share a bit about your experience there?
With our customers, and can you hear me? Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you sound a bit better.
Okay, good. Couple little tips and tricks. That'd be good. So our customers, we've been seeing an increase in rewrites. I think like everyone else. I don't think that's been as intense as some others in the industry. We've seen some customers that have actually come back to looking at leasing. That are old customers of ours, and even some folks that are not traditionally in leasing has not been part of what they do. That's become part of what they're looking at again. So we're continuing to reach out to folks and learn what they're looking for. We did have one customer that was asking for a rewrite, going through that process, but also at the same time was applying for the SBA PPP loan, I think it was. And when that came through, they actually came back and said they did not need that rewrite anymore because they had the funds to continue.
All right. Could you say the last bit, what you were just saying?
About the loan and the
your customer got the PPP loan.
Yeah, so they got the loan and then they came back to us and said they didn't need the rewrite anymore because the loan came through quickly.
Wow. Yeah, I had a whole different experience there, but that's a different conversation. Katie, how about you? Can you tell us a bit about how you're serving customers that are disrupted?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as a software provider, we're in a bit of a different position. So rather than thinking about an individual portfolio, we're thinking about all of our customers' portfolios. And, if you look at the Monitor 100, we have about 60% of the net asset value on the Monitor 100 running on our platform. We're the system of record. So that meant for our customers to be able to support their customers, we needed to be supporting our customers well. And that's certainly something we take very seriously. We've been in touch with our customers throughout this process, and we have clients who haven't seen much of an impact. A client who does a lot of ag, for example, where they actually saw quite good business volumes in the month of March, to clients who are doing very high volumes of smaller ticket, small business financing. We have one client that's seen 500 to 600 calls a day. They have about 9,000 transactions where they need to offer extensions. So, the big piece for us is to provide solutions that offer that. So many of which we have in the system today, but we also very quickly rolled out tools to do bulk extensions, whether you're just deferring the rental and extending the term. 90 days seems to be the most common that people are doing, although I've talked to some who are doing 6 months, or maybe changing the payment structure and maintaining the yield. So that's been something that all of our customers, I'd say, generally speaking, are focused on, as well as making sure that those fees are being extended as well. You have the waiving of late fees, stopping late fee assessment, all kinds of things. And that's really come through in discussions that we're having with our customers. We actually had one of our cloud customers who proactively at the beginning of this went through and deferred all rentals for the month of March without request. So a lot of customers that I'm seeing who are really working to be there for their customers through this difficult time, help them, get those SBA PPP loans, getting them tracked as a very important component. As we look at our cloud customers in particular, they were able to adapt really quickly to working remotely. So that's some great feedback we got from them. They just had to make sure that their team members had access to the internet and they were off and running. And also, I think this drives a lot of innovation as well. So we're in the midst of working through a tool with our customers to help them assess the potential risks they have of their portfolio kind of against the impact geographically of COVID. So out of things like this, sometimes there could be good things that we find where we can find new opportunities that we carry into the future.
It definitely takes some creative problem solving to get through this one. There's a question that came in from the audience that I think really relates to this discussion, and none of you have touched on it directly. Danielle from our audience is asking, have the panelists' companies had to pivot their customer retention and acquisition strategies? And if so, how have they changed? So I'll open that up if any of you can chime in on that one.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll go ahead and talk.
Chris, okay.
I think it's, we're thinking strategically about what to do every day and having discussions about what the future might look like every day. So when you run a company of any size in this environment, I mean, I think probably every leader is looking at, what's the virus impact going to be on the economy over the next month, over the next 6 months, over the next year, over the next 2 years. And also the recession that we're about to go into or we're already in, what effect is that going to have as well? That all affects your strategy in terms of what industries you want to go after, and in terms of how you're going to try to go after customers, and the retention side of that as well. Gets into what industries do you want to even remain in. Now, those that you do want to remain in, there is more competition for the really good transactions in a lot of those industries that all the banks want to go after right now. So we're seeing competition actually increase for the best transactions in industries that everybody knows is going to perform okay. I think that a lot of in terms of extending credit, when you have a balance sheet, a lot of the big question marks get into industries that are affected and where there's an unclear future in a way in terms of how the virus is going to affect those businesses. And we're already seeing different lenders respond in different ways, and some are pulling out of industries altogether, at least temporarily, and others are continuing to lend heavily into them, obviously betting that they're going to be okay and they're going to try to capture market share. So we're kind of weighing all those factors literally every day in the industries that we're in, trying to figure out where we want to kind of play right now. But we also know that in the next few months, as the portfolios start to really show true delinquency, because right now nobody has delinquency. Everybody's just kicking the can down the road through payment deferral. So, the real problems are not going to show up until until the institutions start saying, okay, we're done giving you deferral. And then companies start saying, okay, we can't pay you anymore. And that's going to take some time to flush out. So there's a lot of thought that goes into kind of how we position ourselves right now. And it's, I guess in a way it's interesting. It's keeping life exciting right now, trying to figure it out.
That's a tricky one to navigate. Katie, looked like you might have had something to add.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for us from a customer retention and acquisition perspective, I think from a retention perspective, it's all about being there to support our customers, providing assistance, providing tools, providing, some best practices that we can help them with, or just considerations. In some cases, some businesses are thinking about, what does this mean to me today? But what about as you look down into the future, kind of as Chris said, what's going to happen with delinquencies? Are people going to be doing bulk residual write-downs? All of those types of things. And then I think we're seeing just from a new customer acquisition, it's not stopping. We're seeing new customers come on board for us. Certainly heavy focus on cloud, with the benefits that I think people saw before, but are even more so realizing now. So that's been good to see, and I think it's just a mix based on the type of business and the industries that they're working in. Certainly, people in the hospitality industry a little tougher. Talk to some who are maybe just in one asset class that's seeing some pain, that they're adopting different practices versus those with a more diverse portfolio. So just focus on listening to our customers and understand what we can do for them.
Awesome. All right. Andrew, did you want to add to that one?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is communication with your customers is key, right? And I think
Speaking of communication, I need your volume to come up a bit.
Still, all right, I'm doing what I can. Love these web meetings when technology kicks in here. So
This is our new world.
This is a new world. Yeah, just communication, I think, with customers, finding out what their needs are, how they're dealing with it, and how their world is changing, to be able to adapt with them.
Yeah, it's tough because, the context has shifted for all of us. We've got quite a few questions coming in from the audience. And so although I have a lot of topics planned and I'm always very curious and have lots of questions, I want to get to yours. So Ross from our audience is asking, how much are you hearing about customers having success in getting a PPP loan, an SBA loan, or some form of financing to help them currently? Really common? What are you hearing? Is that something that anyone on our panel can speak to? Chris?
Our dealership applied. We had a really hard time getting somebody to take our application. And we still haven't received any money. I know another company that's actually in the technology industry. They applied through a local credit union in the Midwest, and they're in the Midwest, locally to them, and they got money within days. I've heard that it's a total mixed bag. Some people are having a horribly hard time getting attention of anybody, and other people seem to get the money quickly. That's the two cases I know.
I can actually speak to that as a business owner. I've applied and I've gone through 2 different institutions and I haven't seen anything yet. And it is the most complex and ridiculous process I've ever seen. And I just saw an announcement that they ran out of money. So that's great. Anyway, that was my experience from the PPP loan program. And then talking with my accountant this morning, he's running into that with all of his clients as well. It has not been an easy process. Anybody else have something to add on that topic?
One thing I'd say that we have one of our clients who's doing a lot to assist their customers get through the process to get those loans. So they've actually changed their website to have front and center, here are the steps to go through to help them get the loans. And their position is, the better we can help our customers get the loans, the better it's going to help them continue to be able to pay their rents and continue to get funding from us. So I thought that was a really interesting approach.
Yeah, it's a tricky process. So thanks for that question, Ross. We have another question from Jacqueline. She's asking, have you had to change your credit appetite? Are you finding you are going after a different credit quality of customer or different industries based on trends in the current market? Chris?
Yeah, definitely. It really depends on the industry again. So if you're in an industry that happens to not be affected, for example, if you happen to lend to grocery stores, you're probably not changing your credit practices at all. And we do have one sector that we're in, which is doing extremely well. And we actually haven't changed our credit parameters at all. And we lowered our pricing. The majority of the industries that we're in, they have been affected to varying degrees. So we are seeing, like I said, that the really top credits in small ticket in industries that are at least semi-affected are, you know, if they have a good story, they're still getting funded at good rates. But we're seeing that anything that is a questionable credit at all, you know, B credit, C credit, they're already having a really hard time getting capital. And our projection is that just like any kind of normal recession, as we get into a different cycle where the virus becomes less the issue over time and the economy itself becomes the issue, we'll find that we probably get into pricing that was similar to 10 years ago, where, again, the tougher credits or short-time in business companies, people like that are just going to have a much harder time getting money as we go forward. We're putting more scrutiny into transactions. We're looking for more information. We used to be app only up to pretty high amounts in most industries, and that's changed where we're looking for more information. So, you know, we're looking for leverage, high leverage. We're looking at cash flow. We're looking at bank statements and interviewing more people. So, you know, it's definitely a changing environment. And I think we're going to see even more change over the next few months as things really start to unfold more.
Yeah, it seems like agility is the name of the game right now, with things changing continually. I'm going to shift gears here for just a moment, and we have a message from our platinum sponsor, IDS. Give me just a moment to switch over to that.
The world's economies rely on asset financing. It's an incredible chain of value. Organizations use leases and loans to acquire best-in-class equipment and software they otherwise couldn't afford. Companies selling that equipment and software then invest part of their profits in developing even more innovative technologies. They create innovations for healthcare, agriculture, travel, construction, and more. This generates wealth, creates jobs, and keeps economies humming. What you do matters. Expanding what you do in terms of volume, geographic markets, or asset classes, and becoming more proficient and more profitable is important to you, it's important to the world. And it's easier when you work in the cloud. But you can't get there with spreadsheets. And most on-premises or hosted software solutions don't give you the speed and flexibility you need. That's why we developed IDS Cloud. We took all of the best features and functionality of Rapport origination software and InfoLease portfolio management and built a world-class SaaS offering. Working in the cloud makes your operations faster, smarter, and much more flexible. Also, because IDS Cloud is a true SaaS offering and not just a hosted product, you need no IT infrastructure, just an internet connection. You can add capabilities and capacity as you need them. IDS scales to accommodate firms that are just getting started and asset finance teams with hundreds or thousands of employees. It's a complete front, middle, and back office solution that supports for a full range of asset classes, deal sizes, and deal types. So, if you're ready to grow your business, explore new asset classes, and reduce operating costs, you need to explore IDS Cloud. You can start here with a demo or talk to one of our IDS Cloud experts. It's a great first step towards expanding your role in a thriving global economy.
All right, and we're back. So speaking of technology, we've got a poll up on the screen right now, so let's just give everyone an opportunity to answer the polling questions about disaster recovery, technology change planning, and when do you think we'll recover? So give everybody a moment to respond to that poll. While we're doing that, just wanted to bring up technology considerations as we're coming through this crisis. Andrew, I have a couple of questions for you on technology. What impacts are you seeing in your used equipment resellers? You were sharing a bit previously about what you're seeing. I thought that was interesting. And then also, how is this impacting technology implementation timeframes? Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
How about that? Okay, I tried something different. Again, technology. So in our equipment trading business, we're seeing an upswing, obviously, in our technology group that I believe Chris mentioned that, getting laptops, getting equipment was a struggle. We were able to provide a lot of used equipment and continue to supply equipment to folks. So there's been a huge upswing in laptops, not so much desktops, to individuals, to companies that are looking forward to get their employees safe and at home. Harder to get some equipment, but that definitely was and is something we're seeing in that. General technology implementation, it's a crisis creates enormous problems. It creates fear and uncertainty, but it also removes boundaries and allows for innovation out of necessity along with the opportunity. So in that, for us, the technology was already there to get people out, but requests are coming in from our employees. They're finding different ways to work, and we're able to supply tools to folks faster. And what's probably going to become the new norm is we're going to need to deliver faster. And now today we are sort of at a hyper pace because of the world we're living in. And at some point that's going to have to slow down a little bit. But we're looking at projects in weeks, in delivering those things either for customers or internal needs. And out of this, I think cloud and SaaS is a huge winner in this environment. The ability to deploy and scale quickly, and that promise of the cloud is there. And in the end, I think we're going to make more progress in the next few months than possibly we made in the past 10 years.
Yeah, that's a common theme that I'm hearing from folks. Katie, so we've collaborated in a lot of different industry level working groups and projects. And one of the big topics before all of this crisis came up was some of the mindset shifting that is required to truly embrace technology and innovation. I'm curious, how do you think that our thinking about technology and innovation might be impacted by this crisis?
Yeah, I think it's really been impacted greatly. I think of so many of the discussions we've had on the Tech Innovation Committee. I'm on the Foundation Board of Trustees, and we've talked about all of the digital technology that's been available for over 10 years, and companies aren't adopting it. We have a lot of discussion. People are interested in talking about that, but they aren't always actioning that. So we spent a lot of time talking about how do we get from talk to action. And interestingly, a group of us were together on I think it was March 10th, talking about how do we get things to go from talk to action, what type of disruption might happen, and then we find ourselves a week later with that disruption there. And what I've certainly seen, and I've heard from many, is this has accelerated the adoption of digital technologies. And in some cases, if you take eSignature, which is not innovative, it's technology that's been around for probably 15 plus years, but yet in our industry, many have not fully adopted that. I've talked to many organizations who now, of course, have adopted that, not just for smaller ticket transactions, but transactions in the tens of millions. And the question on some of their minds is that going to stay after this is over? Or is their legal group going to come back and say, okay, slow down? Certainly my hope is that they all see that you can move into these digital technologies and adopt this, and it will help you be more nimble, because I don't think things are going to go back to the way they were. I think everyone's going to be thinking differently about how their people work, how they interact with their customers. I know even if you think of people dealing with paper or cash, I mean, who's going to the office to pick up the mail or to pick up checks? I know for our business, and I know many others, we've said you need to do ACH. If you were still sending us a check, you need to change, and the businesses are doing that. So I think that's exciting to see. Andrew, I fully agree with you on cloud. I think it allows people to work remotely quickly. It allows them to adopt new capabilities quickly. It just kind of takes that concern and risk out of the picture. With that being said, I think it's important for organizations to be thoughtful when they go through the process. You know, what does really true 100% SaaS mean versus I'm hosted? You know, is the SaaS provider on AWS? Security is so critical, and I think that's something that's held some businesses up from going to the cloud. And those proof points are all out there. They're continuing to grow, and I think that's just going to drive more adoption. So this is a very difficult time, but at the same time, I'm excited because I think it's driving adoption of digital technology, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to where we were.
Yeah, it's definitely been a wake-up call. Even in our polling results, we see the question, as you adjust to your new normal, are you considering any technology changes within the next 6 months? And 46% are identifying targeted areas where they need to move to digital. And we've seen this just even in the way that we're meeting today and how you might be meeting with your own teams. We're definitely adopting quicker than we may have previously. Chris, did you have any comments to weigh in on the technology topic?
No, I agree with everything everybody said. Makes sense.
Awesome. So let's talk a bit about the implications of leading through a crisis like this. Chris, what insights can you share with us about leading a team through a crisis like this, and how does that compare to past cycles that you've been through?
Well, I will say that, so I've been in this industry for 32 years now. And I've been through a lot of cycles. 1989-90 was actually a really hard cycle that that's when all the S&Ls and a lot of banks failed. 2000, and then obviously the 10 years ago, making it through that, running a finance company through that. Actually, this time I feel much more confident and prepared. So a lot of it is kind of having the confidence to make, to know that you can hopefully make the right decisions, and also knowing that a lot of it is just beyond your control. I mean, I think, knowing that a lot of it's just situational. If you happen to be in the right industries, you're going to do well. If you happen to be in the wrong ones, you're kind of out of luck. And there's not much you can do about that at this point in terms of, having a portfolio or being heavily into certain industries. But having said all that, I mean, I've spent, the more I've been through these, the more I realize that you have to make the right macro decisions. You have to make the right big decisions about the direction that your business is going. And you have to make some bold moves. You have to be very realistic about how you think things are going to unfold. I spent a lot of my time trying to figure out how this virus is going to be with us over the next few years, because that is what's going to affect how we get out of this as a business and how we do as a business. And if we're in industries and trying to bank companies that don't have a chance because of the virus, that's just a mistake. And we need to, make bold moves to exit. We've fully exited already certain industries because we do not believe that the risk of making an investment in those businesses or that whole industry versus the possible return is worth it right now. So those are the types of decisions that you're having to make at this point. Plus trying to position yourself, for success in the future by, potentially either going more heavily into industries where you think you can make an even bigger impact, doing other strategic things to try to position yourself for the future. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of thinking that I think business leaders should be doing right now, and being very realistic, and you can't just, live on hope. You have to, I always say, plan for the expected and hope for the best. But you can't plan for the hope. So I listen a lot to the governor of California, the governor of New York, the governor of other states who are going to be influential in how we get out of this crisis, and what they're saying, what the scientists are saying, and looking at what's happening in other countries. Japan just went into a global state of emergency today because the virus has come back. And those are indications about how this, to me, this is we're going to be dealing with this for the next probably at least 2 years. It may not be like we're at today for 2 years, but there's gonna be some real impacts on how businesses and humans in the world are going to be dealing with each other, and we have to be realistic about how that may play out. So that's my kind of where my mindset's at right now. That you have to really think hard about how this is going to play out with the different industries that you're in.
Yeah, brutal reality. I was taking notes while you were talking. I love what you said, plan for the expected and hope for the best. Great advice. Katie, as a global software company, you have a whole host of interesting challenges that you must be facing. Can you share with us a bit about what it's like and how you're leading a global team through a crisis like this?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, we have offices in 5 different countries. We have large teams, and each of those locations got hit at a bit different time. Everyone's been impacted, but at a different time in different ways. You can look at India recently, where not only did they have shelter in place, but they also had a point where they couldn't leave the house for a period of time, even for essential items. So, that puts a lot of strain on people. Certainly we're seeing that we need to think about how we, care for our employees and are there for them, and what that means is different to different people. So some people are home with young children. Early on, someone in the team had a great idea. It wasn't me, I wish I could say it was, but to give all of our team members, all of our employees have children, access to a link where they got to pick, a gift. And it was something that we provided. It was something fun for their kids. So I think that was great. Communication is key. So we've been really focused on that across the company. And that's probably the biggest thing that we've heard feedback on from our teams is we're transparent, we're open about what we're doing for them, we're listening. We've done surveys of our team members multiple times so we can find out what they need, either just to support them, whether it be from a technology perspective, working from home, any of those things that it may be. But also, I think for many employees, they're thinking about their livelihoods and themselves and their families. And I'd say that's the other part of the equation, taking care of employees, making sure that we're listening to them, but also giving them comfort that we as a business are in a very good position. So I feel very lucky about that, given the position that IDS is in. With that being said, we are looking out into the future. We're doing stress testing of different scenarios. I think none of us exactly know what the impact of this is going to be, but we're monitoring it very frequently. We're doing stress testing, and we're reviewing that with our team members so that we can alleviate fear of, am I going to have a job? So our stress testing is focused on not having to do any reductions, and I'm happy to say we haven't had to do that. I know that's a big concern for people. Now, in some cases, it's just necessary, so it's not good or bad if you have to do it. But I think it's both the communication with the team and, being very open with them about how the business is doing, and we're in a great position. We've got a lot of great customers, and we're here for the long run. As kind of as Chris said, I've been in the industry for over 30 years as well, so we've been through prior difficult times, and we've been through that. So I think you learn a lot from that you want to bring in, and then pair that with the ideas and input from people newer to our organization from other industries, which is really, really valuable.
Thanks for that. that was one of the themes that came out of our session this morning as well, the importance of communication, but also transparency. And that really comes through in your comments, but then also considering diversity of perspectives as you're looking at the decisions that you're making. Andrew, could you speak a bit about your perspectives on the challenge of leading a team through a crisis like this?
Yeah, I think obviously the human aspect is a major component to this. And so when you're in a crisis like this, I think your real leaders show up. Not necessarily how the org chart is laid out, but I think looking at those folks that do stand up, that do take on the challenge, and activating that talent, empowering them in their areas of expertise, helping them make decisions faster, and all the way being humble. This is a humbling experience globally. Allowing managers to be real. I was with a sort of an all team meeting yesterday, and having one of my managers, a direct report of mine, share his struggles for the first couple of weeks with his reports on as well. So that ability to we may be struggling, and it's okay to open up about that and understand it and be real and be people in the midst of this. One thing that can't be lost in all this is the human aspect. And I heard this by a technology company CTO a couple of days ago. Really, an embodiment of no employee left behind. How are you reaching out not only to your reports, not just about the job, but also about their personal life, how they're doing mentally, physically, how their family is, multiple levels down. That's an important piece in leading through this. And what we do today will get us through tomorrow. Other things we can do is just invest in training and raise the digital acumen of our employees, our customers, our partners in the midst of this, along with echoing the transparency and communication is critical.
That's so key. And I hadn't thought about that before, watching your leaders rise up through this. That's an interesting perspective. So we've planned a lot of different discussion topics for this session, but I see a lot of interesting questions coming through the Q&A stream. So if you're up for it, panelists, I wanna pose some questions from our audience. So the first one, what are your predictions of the biggest changes to our business models that will continue forward that were driven by this pandemic? And that's from Steve in our audience.
I'm happy to take that one. I think it's going to be some of those digital technologies, adoption of e-signature, digital payments, higher uses of portals, cloud adoption. I think those are going to be here to stay because they were talked about before, but I don't think people really realized how it could impact their ability to do business until this happened. And this hit a lot of people off guard, right? We didn't know what was going to happen. So that's what I see staying in the long term is just adoption of those technologies as we move forward, and businesses continuing to innovate. I think AI is going to play a very big role in this as we think about moving forward. There's going to be a lot of focus, obviously, on customer experience, but also, risk reduction and mitigation. And I think there's just a lot of exciting things ahead that we can embrace out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's another question. Oh, did you have something to add to that, Andrew?
The only thing I'd add is just looking at, going into this, I think at least Somerset, we made some good investments technology-wise to allow us to get to the point where we can work well in the midst of this remote environment. And I think looking at budgets, looking at platforms, I think people are going to take a little bit different view of what they choose, what they select, what is their supply chain from a technology stack to know that they're enabled and capable for the new realities of this or some other global event or local or regional event to make sure they're finance company or their company in general survives to the next event. There will be other things, hopefully not quite like this.
Thanks. So did you have something to add, Chris, on that one?
Well, I was just going to say, just from a non-technology perspective, it's an interesting question because, you know, there's also the whole, you know, we're going to see a slew of companies exit again, and that because their portfolios are going to blow up. We're already hearing about some companies that are effectively out of business because if they have too many, if they're bank funded, if they have, or reliant on, you know, non-internal funds, you know, they may be cut off from funding already. So I think it'll just accelerate the trend that happened in the last recession of, you know, bigger balance sheets, less leverage for finance companies, and as well as having to check all the boxes on the technology side. It's just going to, and that's happening in the economy as a whole. The one thing that I keep looking at is that the big winners through this virus are going to be big businesses. The big losers are going to be small businesses, just in general, as a general trend. And I think that may be kind of the case in the equipment finance world as well, and with exceptions. You know, we're a small company, and I think we'll do okay. But we did invest very heavily in technology, and we happen to be in the right industries as well. So. But, you know, I think there'll be a number of the smaller finance companies, again, that don't do well.
Another question. This is about due diligence and fraud. So in the midst, and this is an anonymous attendee, so they're asking this in stealth mode. In the midst of lower standards for due diligence, especially regarding the SBA and PPP loans, are there remote tools that we can leverage to combat fraud? Any ideas on that? Katie?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can help from a set tool perspective, but I've heard many organizations talk about that, and some of the processes that they're using is to look at their data. So for example, if you are financing something with a usage component and you have a customer that says, I need to have a 90-day extension, but you see, you know, the clicks, so to speak, continuing to ratchet up, that's going to be indicative that they probably are doing quite well and they didn't need that. You can also look at organizations and kind of map your portfolio against the areas that are hardest hit. So if you think about the locations of your assets and, you know, what areas are still shelter in place, what is the unemployment rate, you can kind of start to get an idea of where organizations likely are really in a hard place. You look at the NAICS code, that will give you an indication of a type of asset and likely is that kind of a winner or a loser. So I think there's so much you can do with the data, and then hopefully your systems are there to help you call out those patterns and there's those predictors so that you can weave those back into either your collections processes or your processes where you're making the determination of whether or not you allow that extension or restructure.
Thank you. Chris, did you have something to add?
And I don't know if the question is because of a higher use of technology or not, but like I said, we went fully digital, our whole process probably about 3 years ago, and there definitely were certain types of fraud that people did on us that we wouldn't have had, you know, with paper documents. But it also eliminated other frauds. You know, for example, we don't have signature fraud anymore because you don't sign with a, you know, manual signature. So that fraud went away. But it all goes back, all these things, to kind of process mapping. The technology itself enables certain things, but when you do risk analysis of every part of your process, it all goes back to making sure that you have the processes in place to mitigate the potential fraud. So I guess that's what I would say is whenever, you know, we have part of the process that's broken down, you know, it kind of gets back to, oh, did a human have to be able to catch that? And if that's the case, then I'm like, well, that's not a process. That's just an invitation to get frauded. So you have to actually have processes in place that require something to be flunked as a test in order for that fraud to happen, if that makes sense. So it goes, all these things that you do, technology is just part of the equation, but when we do operational planning, it all starts with, you can't have good technology that's going to be efficient without having process mapping that is really good, because without process, the right process mapping, whether it's for fraud or for just efficiency in general, the technology doesn't do any good anyway, in general. So, that we could do a whole other 2-hour session on that, but that's, that's something that people getting into this have to go back to their basic process mapping in general.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't paste a bad process onto good technology and think you're going to get better results. I'm hearing a theme, combination of good process, attention to your process, but also really leveraging the data that you have and looking at things different to help with fraud. Andrew, I think you might be able to field this question. So one of our attendees is asking about rental programs for new or used equipment. So, and they asked it in 2 parts, so I'm going to try and put it together for them. Are you seeing an upswing in rental programs, short-term rental programs for new or used equipment in the technology space?
We touched on that in a management meeting a couple days ago, and I think there is an upswing in certain areas, and certain types of equipment. Material handling, I think we've seen an uptick in short-term rentals. That's been pretty strong in a couple locations of ours. So that's the only one I really know of in the short-term space. Other short-term rental programs we have in other types of equipment, I've not heard it change either direction. It's been sort of business as usual.
Thank you. So I'm trying to make a question out of this, but request to our panelists, can you speak more directly about what industries? So the industries that you serve that are the most impacted, perhaps, we could take it that way.
Yeah, I can answer that. I mean,
Thanks,
one
Chris.
example is we did a lot in the party and event rental business. Financing like tents for events, other things that are used for weddings and up to big, concert events, things like that. Obviously, that's been, very badly affected. Luckily, that's not a big percentage of our portfolio at all. But that's one part that it's hard to know exactly when you're going to be able to have a wedding for 100 people or even have an event for 50,000 people. So a lot of unknowns there. Another area that we're in that's on the opposite extreme is that we do a lot in the kind of last mile delivery space, and we're very embedded in that business, and that's been extremely busy. In fact, we're going to have probably our best month ever in that space. And we don't just finance trucks, but we build trucks with dealer partners and things like that as well. And then in the middle, there's landscape companies, tree care companies, restaurants, bars, food processing and manufacturing. I mean, it's just the gambit, and they're all affected differently, and sometimes a little bit unexpectedly. So, there again, it's hard to say. You have to look at each industry by just kind of in a silo and say, okay, how do we think today this is going to unfold over the next couple of years? Because we're still booking loans. There's sometimes 5-6 year transactions. And we're making bets in a way every day still on a very uncertain situation. So, it's hard. It's not easy to try to figure out, what to do in some cases in terms of whether an industry is really going to be impacted for just a couple months or whether it's going to be for 2 years.
Thanks for that. So another question here. Okay. So let's turn our focus a bit to the future. This is a question from Kyle in our audience. What would be the key indicator that you could point to and would indicate that the worst is over? What are you watching for? Chris.
Gosh, I don't, honestly, I still think you have to really read the press releases and watch the full interviews of the people who are going to open our economy, and that's going to be governors. I mean, that's just the way it's set up. So for good, bad, or indifferent, they are the ones who are going to tell us, and they're the ones who are talking to the epidemiologists about what to do, and economists, and everybody else. So I personally just don't think there's going to be it's going to be a slow relaxing, and if the virus comes back, we're going to be, back to a situation where we're going to be in tightening mode again with virus stuff. But what they're saying is that we need testing, and we need to track cases at some point. Like that's when we know we can kind of start to get back to normal, is when we have enough tests and we have the ability to actually get a low number of cases to the point where we can actually start tracking individual cases again and quarantining people on that basis. That is when we can, after we see the big declines in numbers that should happen in the next few weeks, after that, we still have to have the ability to track and test. Until we have that, we're not going to be able to open up, or if we do, it'll just be a disaster. And people who lead states and the federal government, they know that. There's a reason why we haven't opened up, because this is a it's a very, very fast spreading disease. It's very easily spread, and it's devastating to people who get it. Not everybody, but to some people, it's devastating. So, I mean, that's just the facts. And so I think, you have to look at what our local leaders are saying, because they're the ones who are talking to the experts.
We have another question that's kind of along the same line. Serious question to consider. Did you have something to add, Katie? I saw you pop in.
Yes, the only thing I was going to add, I completely agree with Chris on when the shelter in place changes. I think in addition to that, watching the unemployment numbers is really an important way to look, because that tells us when people are getting back to work, businesses are reopening. So I think that's another indicator, as well as what happens with these loans, the PPP loans. If they run out of funds and we're only partway through, I think that's going to be another indicator. So those are the things I would be watching.
Excellent. So I'll throw this one out, and whoever wants to just wave to me if you want to jump in. So this is a pretty serious question from John, but I think it relates to what Chris and Katie were just talking about. A few senators have sided with the president in urging the reopening of the country sooner rather than later, acknowledging that this approach will result in additional deaths. If your business was asked to restart before you're comfortable with the safety and well-being of your employees, how will you respond? And they would like to hear from each of you. So that's a tough one, but okay, Katie, she's gonna go first. Also, Katie, just on a lighter note, there's a lot of chatter about your nails, and they want to know where you're getting your nails done. So, all right, let's get to that serious question. we lost your,
Oh, there I
your
am.
volume.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, you're back. We didn't hear anything
Great,
that you
great.
said just now. So you get
Well,
a redo.
I appreciate the question. It's a secret. I can't tell anyone about my nails. But what I would say is, throughout this, we've been really focused on the safety of our employees, because without our employees and all of their expertise, we don't have a company. So I think we're in a good position in that we have the ability for our team to work remotely and still fully do their job. So for us, even we've already had discussions, we haven't made full decisions yet, but even when, the governor perhaps says we can open up, people can go back to work, we may hold back for a while just to give our employees more time. So that's something we're thinking about, but we're uniquely positioned. We have the ability to fully work remotely, so it makes it a little different, but I will say safety of our employees is top of mind, so I think that would heavily weigh our decisions there.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, we're an essential business, but we have nobody in the office. And I noticed Andrew's in the office. I mean, I could go work in the office. Like, there's nothing stopping me from doing it. So we could already tell everybody they have to come to work. But I think it gets back to exactly what Katie said. Again, politicians are going to tell us when things could be open potentially, but people also, they're smart and they're risk adverse. And who wants to be the one who gives the virus to their grandma or their mom, or in my situation, I have, it's a little, this is getting a little personal, but I have, an ex-wife who just had a liver transplant, and we've got kids that go back and forth. I mean, it's so complicated for a lot of people, and it's not simple, and so I think until there's a way out where people can feel safe being out in public or working with other people, they're not going to want to do it. It's as simple as that. So that gets back to some basic things that certain governors are already saying that have to be in place before we can kind of get back to normal, which I think makes sense. Because if this thing comes roaring back in certain areas, it doesn't matter what politicians say. People are just going to be like, I ain't doing that. Why do I want to get myself, into a situation where I could die? So that's why I think that, the virus is dictating the future, but we do have some things that we can do. There's a roadmap out there. There's been other pandemics, and there's the same roadmap has to be followed, and that you have to be able to identify people who have the disease. You have to be able to test for who has the disease. It's very basic, and it's out there. We just have to mobilize and get that stuff as a nation, have it available. I just saw today they just started testing for people getting on flights in Japan and the United Emirates, for example. So it's starting. You're going to see a lot. That's going to be the way out. Is people will feel safe that there's tests that are available. They can and when you land in Japan starting today, you get tested, and then you might have to wait for 6 hours to 2 days to get the results. But once you're cleared, then you can go in. That's going to be our future in the short term. That's my belief.
Thanks, Chris. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. We got into this fairly abruptly, and I don't think that's how we're going to get out of this. Sort of echo that idea that it's going to take a while, and if a governor says go back to work, I can't imagine they're going to do that flat out and say everyone go back to work tomorrow or whenever. It's got to be a staggered piece. It's got to be, and Chris, you nailed it with testing, rapid testing, availability of that, knowing that we're not going to reinfect or infect populations again and have our healthcare workers again put in a situation where they're behind in overwhelming our healthcare system. The human aspect to this is people are going to be concerned. We are working from home, and if we are working from home well today, why rush going back? Certain industries travel, entertainment. Are you going to want to go to a movie theater? I don't know. When's the next time you're going to want to sit in a restaurant? I'm not sure. I can't predict the future there of how quickly people are going to feel safe in public near people again. I think it's going to be a slow evolution, but I know we will get back to work. We will get back to being close to people at some point, hopefully sooner than later.
Thanks for that. We have so many questions coming in from our audience, and I wish that we had time to cover all of them. This has been such an interesting discussion. I want to wrap up with a question about how you're thinking about the future. And I asked this in the previous session this morning, and the answers were so interesting and rich. So if you could imagine yourself several years from now, looking back on this crisis, what is the story that you want to be able to tell about how your company and your team and yourself as a professional handled this historic event? We'll start with Katie.
Great. As I think about that, I think I'm going to look back. I'm really proud of how our company and our employees and team handled this. I think I'm going to look back and realize that it helped trigger some new thinking and some new ideas that I believe are going to be really valuable for us and for our customers for years to come, because we'll keep evolving them. And I don't know if we were thinking about it in the same way before. So I think I'm going to look back on both regards and hopefully see that our industry was still thriving and adapting to all this change, and that we're still in a very healthy place, both for us as a company, but this industry, which I've been in for many years and love. So that's what I would look back at.
Thank you for that. Andrew, how about you?
Looking forward to sort of what will be the next normal. Again, proud, I echo that, and proud of our company, our employees. In the face of the uncertainty that we've had, they've continued to work, they've continued to produce and take on those challenges head on. When we look back, we're going to be a better organization, we're going to be a better industry, better country, better world for getting through this together and banding together in that process.
Excellent. And Chris, we'll have you wrap up that question for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think coming out of the last recession, I'm proud already about the fact that we had thought about a lot of these things, not necessarily a virus coming, but just being much better positioned from a technology perspective, from a strategic perspective, picking industries that we thought were going to be important in the future. And so, that's one part where I'm already proud that we're doing really well. And then secondarily, I already know that, a lot of our employees were really, really grateful, A, to still have a job, and B, to feel safe. Like we were I think we started doing remote on the 10th of March. I mean, I think we were probably the first company that I know of. And it just made people feel better, because they were, a lot of people are scared about this virus. Like, they don't want to get it. So the fact that we had that, and at first it was just an optional thing. We said, you can go home, go work from home. And so I'm proud of that, and echoing everything else that Katie and Andrew said, in terms of just, how strong our staff has been, how I do think that we as well we're starting to make some strategic decisions already that will affect the future that I think are going to be winners. And I think we too will do fine, and we'll be stronger for it in the future. The dark side is there's going to be a lot of people who are going to suffer economically from this, and that part is sad and hard. It's not going to be an easy time. It's already a hard time for a lot of people. So I just want to acknowledge that, and we thank our lucky stars every day for having a good income and being in an industry that's continued. But we continue to have empathy for those, even our customers who just happen to be in a business that they can't work, and that's a horrible feeling. So.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a great point, and we'll wrap with that thought. A lot, a little empathy goes a long way. We never know what somebody else is going through, and you never know what somebody on the other side of the screen is facing. Everybody is dealing with something different in this crisis, but we're all in it together. I want to just thank our panelists for sharing so candidly and so generously this afternoon, and thank you to our audience for joining in the conversation. Your questions were so interesting. I think we have enough material for another session. And once again, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, IDS Asset Finance Technology. In these uncharted times, the last thing you need to worry about is management of your front and back office systems. IDS Cloud was designed to take the worry out of system management, let you focus on building your business. IDS Cloud is 100% scalable software as a service solution that allows you to pay only for what you use. All you need is an internet connection to have access to the equipment finance industry's leading origination and portfolio management solution. Thank you, IDS, our sponsor, and thank you all for attending. That's a wrap. See you next time. Check out the post-conference survey. That will help us in planning so we can bring you some more content in the future. Have an awesome day. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.